In the unforgiving arithmetic of global power, empires do not collapse because they run out of weapons. They collapse because they lose the ability to tell those weapons where to go. Deep within the fortified logistics hubs of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the screens have just gone dark. No alarms sounded, no missiles breached the airspace. But in a matter of seconds, a classified American capability has silently severed the digital spinal cord of Tehran's regional influence. The axis of resistance is suddenly deaf, blind, and paralyzed. The strategic map of the Middle East is fundamentally breaking. Power in the Middle East has always been dictated by geography, but in the 21st century, geography is defined by logistics. For over 40 years, the Islamic Republic of Iran has recognized a cold, inescapable truth. In a symmetric, conventional conflict against the United States or its heavily armed regional partners, the Iranian military would face rapid, systematic annihilation. To survive, Tehran engineered a masterpiece of asymmetric warfare. They built what strategists call the axis of resistance. This is not merely a political alliance. It is a sprawling, decentralized, transnational military apparatus stretching from the rugged mountains of Yemen through the deserts of Iraq and Syria, all the way to the Mediterranean coastline of Lebanon. To the untrained eye, this network appears as a collection of ideological militias. But through the lens of hard realism, the axis is nothing more than a massive, highly complex logistics pipeline. The Houthis, Hezbollah, and the Iraqi paramilitaries are the weaponized branches, but the roots remain firmly planted in the Iranian plateau. The lifeblood of this entire system is the uninterrupted flow of data, encrypted telemetry, targeting coordinates, and supply manifests originating from the bunker complexes in Tehran and the southern coastal ports. Look at the geography of Iranian power projection. The port city of Bandar Abbas is the beating heart of their maritime logistics. It sits right on the edge of the Strait of Hormuz, a geographic choke point where the shallow, narrow waters naturally favor the defender. From here, hidden within the massive volume of commercial shipping, Iran smuggles precision-guided munitions, drone components, and ballistic missile parts to its proxy forces. But moving physical hardware is only half the battle. Once a Shahed drone reaches Yemen, or a Fateh, 110 missile reaches southern Lebanon, it requires constant software updates, satellite navigation keys, and synchronized operational commands from the Quds Force commanders back home. This requires a digital tether, an invisible, heavily encrypted C4 ISR network, command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Iran spent billions creating closed-loop intranets, buried data centers, and secure satellite uplinks to maintain absolute control over this sprawling proxy empire. They believed this system was immune to conventional bombing. They believed their strategic depth was secure. They were wrong. Warfare has evolved beyond the blunt instrument of high explosives. The United States just proved that the ultimate weapon of the 21st century is the weaponized manipulation of supply chains and data flows. The event did not begin with a flash of light. It began with the quiet execution of a classified cyberkinetic payload. This was not a standard denial of service attack designed to harass civilian infrastructure. This was an apex-tier, military-grade digital decapitation. A dormant architecture of malicious code, likely seeded years ago deep within the Iranian military logistics management system, was suddenly awakened. The immediate effects were catastrophic, not because they destroyed infrastructure, but because they inverted reality. Inside the shipping terminals of Bandar Abbas, the automated cranes ground to a halt. The digital manifests for hundreds of container ships were instantaneously scrambled. A vessel carrying critical guidance systems destined for the Red Sea suddenly found its navigation computers wiped, its cargo categorized as perishable agricultural goods. The physical port was intact, but its operational utility was reduced to zero. But the strike went much deeper than maritime shipping. It targeted the very nervous system of the Quds Force Operational Command. In the fortified bunkers beneath the Zagros Mountains, the servers hosting the encrypted communications networks began to cannibalize their own data. The GPS coordinates intended for drone swarms were spoofed at the source. Iranian operators initiating test flights of loitering munitions watched in horror as their telemetry screens showed the drones violently veering off course, some crashing into the Iranian desert, others actively turning back toward their own launch coordinates. This is the brutal reality of escalation dominance. The United States did not need to deploy a carrier strike group to bomb Bandar Abbas and risk a regional conflagration. By targeting the logistics backbone with a classified capability, Washington effectively imposed a total blockade on Iranian foreign policy without a single ship firing a shot. They turned Iran's reliance on centralized, high-tech coordination into a fatal vulnerability. The invisible tether connecting Tehran to its proxies was not just cut, it was poisoned. Out in the field, across the Levant and the Arabian Peninsula, the effects were instantaneous and terrifying for the proxy commanders. Hezbollah units in southern Lebanon, relying on secure Iranian data links for early warning radar feeds, found their screens filled with static or phantom targets. Houthi missile crews in Yemen, preparing to target Red Sea shipping lanes, realized their firing solutions were corrupted. The axis of resistance was suddenly reduced to a collection of isolated, blind infantry units holding highly advanced weaponry they could no longer accurately aim or coordinate. Every military force requires a hierarchy of information. When that hierarchy collapses, cohesion evaporates. The Quds Force officers embedded with these militias realized that their secure tablets and encrypted radios were useless. The strategic depth that Iran had spent 4 decades building the ability to threaten Israel and the Gulf states from multiple fronts simultaneously was completely neutralized in an afternoon. This is the essence of hard power applied through the gray zone. You do not destroy the enemy's spear, you simply blind the man holding it. The geography of the Middle East remains unchanged. The mountains, the deserts, and the seas are still there. But the map of operational reality has been violently redrawn. Iran's perimeter of defense has collapsed back to its own borders, not because its armies were defeated in the field, but because the logistical bridge connecting them to the outside world has been deleted. When the digital fog of war descends, the illusion of proxy power shatters, leaving only the cold reality of isolation. As the screens in Tehran display nothing but corrupted data, the strategic calculus shifts from offensive projection to desperate survival. The question is no longer what the Americans have done, but how a blinded Iranian command structure can possibly respond without triggering its own annihilation. Panic is a luxury that military commanders cannot afford, but deep inside the Iranian command centers, the atmosphere borders on operational paralysis. The immediate reaction of any modern military when its digital networks are compromised is to sever the connection and fall back to legacy systems. Tehran issued the emergency order to transition to analog communication. Couriers, shortwave radios, and hardline telephones became the only approved methods of contact. From a tactical perspective, this is a necessary survival mechanism. From a strategic perspective, it is a death sentence. You cannot manage a synchronized multi-theater proxy war against high-tech adversaries using the communication methods of the 1980s. Analog systems suffer from massive latency. It takes hours to transmit targeting coordinates via courier or coded shortwave burst that would normally take milliseconds over a secure digital link. In modern warfare, latency equals death. By the time an order reaches a Hezbollah rocket battery or a Houthi drone unit, the battlefield has changed, the target is moved, or the enemy is already struck. The leaders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps understand the geopolitical trap they have been pushed into. The logic of escalation demands a response. If a nation-state suffers a debilitating attack and does not retaliate, its deterrence is exposed as a bluff. Regional adversaries like Israel and Saudi Arabia are watching closely. If Tehran absorbs this decapitation without striking back, the axis of resistance will lose faith in its patron, and the entire proxy network will begin to disintegrate. But how does a blinded power strike back? A conventional military response is off the table. If Iran attempts to launch ballistic missiles at American bases in Iraq or the Gulf, they must do so without their integrated C4ISR networks. This means degraded accuracy, no early warning against incoming American interceptors, and the absolute certainty of a devastating kinetic counterstrike from the United States. Washington holds total escalation dominance, The U.S. Fifth Fleet, based in Bahrain, has already surged its force posture. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and nuclear-powered attack submarines have quietly moved into blocking positions near the Strait of Hormuz. The skies above the Gulf are saturated with American ISR drones, vacuuming up every electronic emission emanating from the Iranian coast. The U.S. is signaling a clear, undeniable truth. We can see everything you are doing, and you can see nothing. If you escalate conventionally, you will be destroyed. Faced with this insurmountable disadvantage in the physical and digital domains above ground, Iranian strategists look to the only domain left where asymmetric vulnerability still exists. They look to the bottom of the sea. The geography of the global internet relies heavily on a massive network of undersea fiber optic cables. A critical cluster of these cables runs right through the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, and the Gulf of Oman waters, easily accessible to Iranian naval assets and proxy forces. This is the ultimate gray zone escalation. If the United States has used a classified capability to sever Iran's military logistics, Iran will threaten to sever the logistical backbone of the global economy. Intelligence begins to leak that the IRGC Navy is preparing specialized midget submarines and deep-water explosive drones. The threat is not spoken through diplomatic channels. It is communicated through the sudden, anomalous movement of Iranian maritime assets toward the cable transit zones. Tehran is attempting to hold the global financial system hostage. They are saying, if we cannot have a functioning digital network, neither will the rest of the world. This is a classic maneuver in great power competition. When you are outmatched in a primary theater, you horizontally escalate to a domain where the adversary has more to lose. The United States economy, European financial markets, and Asian supply chains depend entirely on the terabytes of data flowing through those cables every second. Severing them would cause trillions of dollars in economic damage and trigger a global panic. Iran is betting that the threat of this economic Armageddon will force Washington to back down and restore the operational status quo. But the logic of hard power rarely yields to blackmail. The United States anticipated this exact pivot. You do not execute a strategic decapitation strike without mapping out the adversary's only viable paths of retaliation. The American response to the undersea cable threat is swift, silent, and overwhelmingly kinetic in its posture. The U.S. Navy does not issue a press release. Instead, they alter the operational geometry of the Arabian Sea. Virginia-class fast attack submarines, the apex predators of the deep ocean, are repositioned to shadow every single Iranian vessel capable of deploying deep-water munition. Anti-submarine warfare helicopters from carrier strike groups begin conducting aggressive low-altitude sweeps right over the exact coordinates where the fiber optic cables lie. This is forced posture applied as a psychological weapon. The United States is actively denying the battle space. Washington's counter-signal is chillingly clear. The ocean floor is not a gray zone, it is a red line. If an Iranian asset attempts to tamper with the global data infrastructure, it will be sunk instantly. And the United States will use that event as the casus belli to systematically dismantle the entirety of the Iranian Navy. The escalation ladder has reached its peak. Tehran is boxed in, their conventional forces are overmatched, their proxy logistics are paralyzed, and their horizontal escalation option has been preemptively blocked by superior American naval geometry. The balance of forces has shifted dramatically, and the window of Iranian vulnerability is wide open. In the unforgiving ecosystem of the Middle East, weakness invites aggression. While the United States holds Iran in a strategic chokehold at sea and in cyberspace, other regional actors recognize that the umbrella of Iranian protection over its proxies has collapsed. The standoff at sea masks a much bloodier reality taking shape on the land. As Tehran suffocates under the weight of its own severed logistics, the predators of the region sense the blood in the water. The carefully constructed balance of terror that protected the proxy networks has vanished, opening the door for an unprecedented campaign of systematic destruction. The true cost of the American decapitation strike is not paid in Tehran, it is paid in Damascus, Beirut, and Sana'a. For years, the State of Israel has waged a shadow war against the Iranian entrenchment in the Levant. This campaign between wars was heavily constrained by the presence of advanced Iranian early warning radars and encrypted C4 ISR systems that provided Hezbollah and Syrian militias with a crucial buffer. Israel had to calculate the risk of advanced surface-to-air missiles and coordinated retaliatory rocket barrages. But with the classified American strike blinding the Iranian logistics and command network, that buffer is gone. The proxies are isolated. The early warning screens are dark. The command links to the IRGC generals are dead. Israel recognizes this strategic vacuum and immediately moves to exploit it with ruthless efficiency. In a matter of hours, the Israeli Air Force launches a massive multi-front campaign. This is no longer a shadow war. This is an open, systematic eradication of proxy logistics. Squadrons of F-35 stealth fighters penetrate Syrian and Lebanese airspace with total impunity. They are not hunting individual terrorist leaders. They are hunting the infrastructure of warfare. Intelligence that Israel has gathered for years, the exact locations of underground missile silos, drone assembly plants, and precision-guided munition warehouses, is suddenly actionable on a massive scale. Without the digital coordination from Tehran, the proxy air defense operators are firing blind, shooting unguided missiles into empty skies. Israeli munitions systematically obliterate the massive weapons caches that Iran spent billions of dollars and decades smuggling into the region. The logistics backbone is not just choked, it is being physically incinerated. Hezbollah commanders, unable to coordinate a unified response due to their forced reliance on slow analog communications, watch helplessly as their strategic deterrent is wiped off the map. They cannot launch a coordinated swarm of drones because the GPS spoofing is still active. They cannot unleash a massive rocket barrage because the firing orders cannot be verified, and the launch sites are being destroyed before the orders even arrive. This is the cascading failure of the proxy model. Iran built its defense strategy on the premise that its proxies would fight America and Israel so that Iran would not have to. But the U.S. strike revealed the fatal flaw in this architecture. A proxy without logistics is just a target. By severing the digital head in Tehran, the United States allowed its regional ally to butcher the paralyzed body in the Levant. The geopolitical consequences of this event will resonate for decades. The map of the Middle East has been violently altered. The axis of resistance, once perceived as an unstoppable crescent of influence, has been fractured into isolated, degraded militias fighting merely for their own survival. The Arab states of the Persian Gulf, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain observed this brutal display of American and Israeli hard power with quiet satisfaction. For years, they doubted American resolve, fearing that Washington was withdrawing from the region and leaving them vulnerable to Iranian missile blackmail. This crisis proves otherwise. It demonstrates that the United States does not need to deploy hundreds of thousands of ground troops to dominate the theater. American power projection has evolved. The ability to paralyze a nation's military logistics remotely is the ultimate security guarantee. This cements the strategic alignment between the Gulf states, Israel, and Washington. The balance of power heavily consolidates around the U.S. security architecture. But hard realism dictates that victory is never final. It merely changes the nature of the next conflict. Iran has suffered a humiliating, catastrophic defeat in the conventional and gray zone domains. Their strategic depth is gone. Their proxy deterrent is in ruins. Their conventional military is hopelessly outmatched. When a state is stripped of all its external defense mechanisms, its leadership will inevitably seek the ultimate internal defense. The logic of survival points directly toward the nuclear threshold. By proving that Iran's conventional and proxy logistics can be deleted at the push of a button, the United States has inadvertently accelerated Tehran's calculus for acquiring a nuclear weapon. If you cannot deter an enemy by threatening their periphery, you must deter them by threatening their total destruction. The crisis over Iran's logistics ends, but the countdown to a nuclear breakout accelerates. Furthermore, this event sends shockwaves through the corridors of power in Beijing and Moscow. The great power rivals of the United States just witnessed the execution of a perfect, bloodless decapitation strike. China and Russia both rely heavily on complex, centralized digital logistics networks to manage their own vast militaries. They now know that the United States possesses classified capabilities that can reach deep into hardened, air-gapped systems and turn a military apparatus into useless scrap metal. This triggers the most intense, invisible arms race in human history. The next global war will not be decided by who has the most tanks or the fastest fighter jets. It will be decided by who controls the data flow. It will be a war for digital sovereignty, secure telemetry, and unhackable supply chains. China will pour trillions into quantum encryption. Russia will attempt to sever its military networks entirely from the global internet. The American strike on Iran was a localized application of a global capability. It was a warning shot fired across the bow of the world. In the cold, unyielding arena of great power competition, the true masters of strategy do not destroy the enemy's army. They destroy the enemy's ability to command it. The crisis in the Persian Gulf fades into a tense, heavily armed standoff. The physical choke point of the Strait of Hormuz remains open, secured by American steel. But the invisible choke points of the 21st century, the data streams, the logistics hubs, the satellite uplinks are now the primary battlegrounds of the future. The United States has proven that it holds the keys to those gates. Iran is left to survey the ashes of its proxy empire, isolated, blind, and hyper-vulnerable, learning the hardest lesson of geopolitics. In the modern world, if you do not control your logistics, you do not control your destiny.